Hi, I'm Corey Driver, and this is Moving Forward. So this Passion Week, we are in Isaiah 50, Psalm 31, and Matthew 26, and we're talking about the ears of a disciple. Now, all the great worship services are sensorial experiences, and I am really glad for that. And I'm really glad for that as I think about my big brother who is allergic to basically everything. And so at Christmas, his eyes swell absolutely shut because of the poinsettia pollen. And at Easter, they also swell all the way shut because of lily pollen. His eyes swell shut during Passion or Palm Sunday because of palms, and sometimes if there's a donkey dander. That brother is deeply allergic to any incense, so frequently his eyes just swell shut. But he can always hear. So when I think about the big holidays in church, especially growing up, I think about what he could hear, because that's all he got. Isaiah 50, 4-9 is one of 4 servant songs that discusses in Isaiah the difficulties, identities, and ministries of God's servant. Now, like most prophecy, these servant songs are polyvalent, which is to say they offered understandable good news in the time of their original hearers. And as the church learned more about the identity and ministry and difficulties of Jesus, these words made new sense to them as well. This year, when I was reading this passage, I noticed the detail that the servant has the ear of a disciple that is opened by the Lord. That's in verses 4 and 5. The servant's job is to be ready to hear what God is saying, and this bit is a little recursive. The first thing that the servant should hear is the song about the servant. The servant needs to hear this song about the servant suffering bodily while being faithful to God. The servant is going to need to wait for justice and vindication from the Lord. Look, there have always been evil people who do evil to others simply because they can. The servant hears from God directly a song about that servant, and with a disciple's ears hears words about withstanding injustice and evil because the Lord will come to help. The psalm appointed for this week, number 31, is an important choice because it offers a double movement, taking the singer and the hearer through an emotional process. In the appointed reading, we only read a short portion of the second movement, but I'd urge folk who are using this psalm in worship, do the whole thing. It's not that long. You got them. Keep them. So there is a classic form in these psalms of moving from a request to help to an expression of trust to expression of thanksgiving, as if the help request has already been fulfilled. In this psalm, we do the whole emotional roller coaster actually twice. So 1-4, verses 1-4, is the request for help. And then 9-13 is the next request for help. The expressions of trust are 5-6, and then 14-18. And the expressions of thanksgiving then are 7-8 and 19-24. Why does this matter? Because hearing the psalmist move from requests for help to expressions of trust to thanksgiving for knowing that God will act before God has already acted helps us understand the emotional roller coaster that was Jesus' experience in the Garden of Gethsemane. It lets us hear expressions of trust and praise and request and like anticipatory sadness, but also trust and also praise and also please do this thing that I'm requesting of you. Jesus has been neither the first nor the last to face a very difficult emotional trial over a matter of life and death. And we can hear the witness of those who struggle with doing God's will when it's really hard. So then for me, the center of Passion Week, as we're in the gospel text, is not the crowds at the triumphal entry, nor is it the grotesque pantomime of Pilate toying with Jews and ultimately condemning an innocent man to death. Instead, I think in this section, as in the rest of the gospel, the most interesting thing is not what is done to Jesus, but what Jesus does. Jesus convened a meal and offered his body in the bread, and after supper, he offered his blood in the cup. There's no show. There's nothing to see. The bread does not change. The wine does not change. It is only the heard words that make the difference. It's in hearing the words. It's in having literally the ear of a disciple to hear what Jesus is saying that the meaning and the change happens. Though frequently overlooked, Matthew includes a very interesting detail. Before going out to the Garden of Gethsemane and being arrested by the soldiers that Judas would bring, Jesus and his disciples sang a hymn. Now, a generation before Jesus, opposing schools of Jewish law staked out various positions on how much of the Egyptian Hallel, which is Psalm 113 to 118, one should sing at this time, before and after the Passover meal. But already during the time of Jesus and during the Second Temple period, another song had been added to the Passover celebrations, the Great Hallel of Psalm 136. If the disciples sang a song after the meal, it was probably Psalm 136. The refrain of each line of the song is because his loving kindness is everlasting. Ki leolam hesdo. God created the world because his loving kindness is everlasting. God defeated evil kings because his loving kindness is everlasting. God has taken care of the poor because his kindness is everlasting. God has given bread to the hungry because his loving kindness is everlasting. When Jesus went to the valley to pray, he was arrested in secret. There was a secret sham trial at night. He was handed over to Pilate to be executed, making no secret that they kill the innocent along with the guilty. And all the while he had songs ringing in his ears. He remembered the servant song of Isaiah talking about God's servant would face difficult ministry, but God's triumph would eventually come. And he knew, as he was offering his body and blood in the meal, and then literally his body and blood as he was tortured to death by the Romans, that he was doing it because God's loving kindness is everlasting. Jesus has the ear of a disciple, and we get to too, as we hear the songs and words surrounding Jesus' passion, arrest, suffering, and death this week. Thanks be to God. Amen.